Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mass Retirees Weekly Update. Today's Friday, April 19th. I'm Sean Duhamel. Thank you so much for joining with us and tuning in again this week. Now, I've got a lot to go over this week. This video will be condensed, but all Mass Retirees members will receive the email version of the video that's going to contain a lot more information for all of you. That comes out every Friday morning at 6 a.m. If you are a member of our association and you don't receive the email, reach out to us. Make sure that we have the proper email address for you on file and that you're receiving it. Now, if you are a Massachusetts retired public employee and you're not a member of Mass Retirees, please consider joining. You can find full information on our association at massretirees.com. The link is also included in the Facebook version of this message as well as on YouTube. We also have an associate membership for active Massachusetts public employees who are not yet retired, but you're nearing retirement age. Our association and the information that we publish through our newsletter and in our weekly email reports are vital to you in terms of planning and anticipating your future retirement. So if you're not a member, if you're not an associate member, please consider joining. Now, in terms of the news of the week, again, I have a lot to unpack. Let me start with the state budget. As we said in last week's message, the House of Representatives is set to take up the fiscal year 25 state budget. Debate begins this coming Wednesday. The House Ways and Means Committee has included in their draft of the budget a proposal to create a special commission on the cost of living adjustment. This proposal was initiated by our association. We requested that Governor Healy file the language in her version of the FY25 budget. Thankfully, she did include it in her budget. The House of Representatives has also chosen to follow suit. There are some minor differences in the makeup of the commission and some of the language being used. But the bottom line is both versions of the commission name Mass Retirees to a seat at the table. So we will have a strong voice in this process. We view this process as being essential to making improvements on a regular basis going forward in terms of the COLA base, the creation of a new enhanced or senior COLA, both at the state level as well as at the local level. Now, the main focus of the commission, of course, is going to be on the state and teachers' retirement system. That's where a new funding mechanism, a new funding philosophy, so to speak, needs to be created to help pay for the COLA or find the way to spread the COLA payments out going forward, and we'll be reporting on that in greater detail as we go forward. But this is a huge step forward. We are very grateful to House Ways and Means Chairman Aaron Michowitz, to Speaker Ron Mariano, to Majority Leader Mike Moran, and the entire House for seeing fit to include this in the Ways and Means budget. Now, in addition to the creation of the COLA Commission, we have also proposed one amendment to the budget. That amendment is number 845. It has been filed on behalf of our association by State Representative John Lawn from Watertown. Representative Lawn has long been a key supporter of our association. He is also the lead sponsor of our bill to increase the basic life insurance. So what Amendment 845 would do is increase the basic life insurance benefit from the current $5,000 level to a new level of $10,000. This proposal has been in the works for many years now. As a matter of fact, this benefit has not been increased since 1985, and it is amongst our top priorities for the current legislative session. We will be reporting back to all of you next week in terms of the progress that we're making, but we are reasonably confident that in the near future we're going to finally be able to make some progress and improve this benefit going forward. It has been a long time coming. Now, speaking of a long time coming is the issues of the Social Security windfall elimination provision, the so-called WEP, as well as the government pension offset. As all of you, I think, know by now, a congressional hearing took place earlier this week on Tuesday in Washington, D.C., right on Capitol Hill, before the subcommittee, the House Subcommittee on Social Security, which is chaired by Republican Congressman Drew Ferguson from the state of Georgia. The ranking Democratic member is John Larson from the state of Connecticut. The Subcommittee on Social Security falls under the purview of the House Ways and Means Committee, which is chaired by Republican Congressman Jason Smith from Missouri. And our congressman from here in Massachusetts, Richie Neal, is the ranking Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee. So a week ago, it was announced that the hearing was going to take place. The focus of the hearing was on the overall issues of WEP and GPO. Now, if you remember back last November, on the Monday of Thanksgiving week, the House held a field hearing in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Louisiana, just like Massachusetts, is a non-Social Security state. The hearing in Louisiana focused exclusively on the impact of WEP and GPO on public retirees. The four Georgia retirees that were called to testify at that hearing were all affected by either the WEP and or the GPO. In the aftermath of the hearing, more than 800 letters of written testimony, including testimony from our association, which we have published in The Voice, were submitted to the committee. This is extraordinary. The voice of retirees from all across the country, not just here in Massachusetts, but in the other affected states as well, is being heard. And the fact that Congress chose just 5 months after the Louisiana hearing to hold a second hearing in Washington, D.C. on this topic is really proof positive that the advocacy that's taking place, that has been ongoing for 4 decades, is finally seeing some results, some positive results to keep this issue alive on the congressional front burner and hopefully finally get the attention and a resolution to this to bring relief to public retirees. Now, this hearing, unlike the hearing that took place in Louisiana, strictly focused on the background of WEP and GPO, why they were created in the first place, how those two particular laws factor into the overall Social Security system. They also took a close look at what the options are in terms of bringing relief to retirees. Now, whether it be full repeal, whether it be some type of reform, or worst case scenario, they leave everything in place and discontinue with the status quo, which is absolutely what we don't want to see. Now, let me say at the outset, before I get deeper into this, that it has long been the position of mass retirees, going all the way back to 1983, when the WEP and GPO were first created. We have criticized these two laws as being unfair, unjust, and just bad public policy for 41 years now. In a perfect world, we would like to see both WEP and GPO come to an end and be fully repealed. However, it is clear after listening to the testimony and the comments from congressional leaders on Tuesday and in the aftermath of the hearing that full repeal of WEP and GPO is a long shot at best. Most likely it is not going to happen, at least not in the short-term future. Now, the four experts that were called to testify on Wednesday are all experts on Social Security. That was the goal of Congress, to hear from experts, to bring their expertise to the table, to be able to answer questions. 3 of the 4 witnesses were called by the Republican majority. 1 witness was called by the Democratic minority. That's the way Congress operates. The majority party that is in control of the chamber at the time calls the majority of the witnesses. And so that is the way things work. Now, admittedly, watching the hearing was disappointing in many ways. First and foremost, the testimony from the 3 Republican witnesses were clearly in opposition to full repeal of WEP and GPO. And I should add that this was not unexpected. And as a matter of fact, there was no aspect of the hearing that came as a surprise at all. We anticipated what was going to happen before we went into the hearing. And maybe it is that our association's been involved in these issues for many decades. Many of us, including myself, have legislative experience working in the Massachusetts State House. We understand how these processes work. We have been to this movie before. We have been involved on both sides of issues like this, both in terms of putting the hearing together as well as testifying and being in the room. So there was nothing that took place on Tuesday that came as a surprise. However, we do understand for the 2.1 million retirees across the country who are currently impacted by the WEP, and the nearly 750,000 retirees who are impacted by the GPO, it can be very disappointing and disheartening to hear testimony saying that you're wrong and that you're not going to receive the benefits that you believe that you're entitled to and that you paid for and that you earned. It is very difficult. We understand that. But at the same time, we need to find a way to move forward with these issues and bring immediate relief to our members. And that's why over the past decade, Mass Retirees has shifted our focus from full repeal, which we have come to the conclusion is most likely not going to happen, at least in the foreseeable future, to focusing on reform of both the windfall elimination provision and, importantly, the government pension offset, which we do believe is achievable. Now, coming away from the hearing in terms of our observations, as I said previously, we had 4 people testify. 3 of the experts came out in opposition to full repeal. The overwhelming reason why they oppose full repeal is the fact that by fully repealing the WEP, for instance, retirees from states like Massachusetts that are not covered by Social Security would actually receive a larger Social Security benefit than what you earned. That's the reason why the WEP law was created in the first place back in 1983. Retirees at that time who were receiving pensions from non-covered service, so service not covered by Social Security, because of the way that the Social Security formula works, those retirees were receiving a larger benefit than what they actually paid for and what they earned. Congress tried to fix that by passing the WEP. Now, we all know now that the WEP overcorrects. It took too much money away from people. That's what makes it unfair. So according to the experts, if you go back to the full Social Security benefits for everybody, the pre-WEP law, retirees would receive more than what they actually earned. And that's why it has been so difficult for 40 years to garner enough public support and enough support on Capitol Hill to pass a WEP repeal and a GPO repeal law. In addition to the fact that retirees would receive a larger benefit, also comes the overall cost of full repeal, which in today's dollars is $183 billion over the next 10 years. This would reduce the Social Security solvency by 1 year and add additional debt to the system. So those two factors combined are the lion's share of the reason why full repeal, at least absent a larger reform of Social Security, just is not likely to happen. And it's also why in the U.S. Senate, where we need 60 votes, the additional 7 or 8 votes that we need to get over the hump and to get to the 60 are very elusive and most likely are not going to come. By design, the Senate is set up to take a very conservative, very measured approach to making these types of changes. That's why that 60 vote threshold exists. Now, we did have one witness that did testify that she supports full repeal. She is Nancy Altman. She is the president of Social Security Works. Ms. Altman is well known in terms of her expertise on Social Security. However, I should add that even her testimony indicated that full repeal, if it were to come, would most likely have to take place as part of a larger overall reform of Social Security, which in her mind would involve a substantial increase in the federal payroll tax, which under the current congressional leadership in partisan makeup is just not going to happen. I think all of us understand that. So where does that leave us in the meantime? Again, your voices are being heard. The only reason why these two hearings have taken place is because of the unrelenting advocacy of retirees across the country, not just the folks here in Massachusetts. And we have been on top of this for a very long time now, but our ranks have grown substantially in recent years through the internet and through online groups, and their advocacy have helped to keep this right on the congressional front burner. As I said a moment ago, there were no surprises that came out of this hearing. The other thing that was pretty clear to anyone who watched the hearing is that there is a deep partisan divide in terms of the ideological beliefs in terms of how Social Security should function and how it should be reformed going forward. Those ideological differences are going to need to be overcome, and compromises are going to be necessary in order to sustain this system going forward, and also to pass, whether it be full repeal or some type of a compromise reform. Is going to take compromise in order for that to happen going forward. And finally, in terms of next steps, again, our association and our allies around the country believe that the only viable path forward, at least in the short term, is through reform of both WEP and GPO. Insisting on an all or nothing approach of full repeal or nothing at all is only going to result in retirees continuing to be harmed, retirees continually to walk away empty-handed at the end of another congressional session. We need to come together and rally around a viable path forward. And that viable path forward, at this point in time, we believe can only come through reform of both the WEP and the GPO. We need to make sure that we are providing relief for the folks who are most vulnerable, who have been the most seriously affected financially by the unfairness of these two laws. And as I said before, we have been working on this for a very long time. There is not a day that goes by that myself and Frank Valeri and the other members of our team don't hear from a public retiree who's either affected by the WEP, affected by the GPO, in some cases both, who don't know how to make ends meet because you're losing hundreds of dollars per month because of one, if not both of these two laws. Something has to give, and we're going to continue doing everything we possibly can to ensure that that's going to happen. But it really is going to require all of us around the country coming together with one voice, and that voice has to be on a viable path forward. Again, insisting on an all or nothing position isn't going to get us to where we need to be. So again, members of our association should look to today's email message for full details. If you're not a member, please consider joining. This is really about strength in numbers, and it is just so important that we have as many people come together around these issues as we possibly can. So with that, thank you for watching today. We will have more information as new developments occur going forward, both in terms of the state budget as well as what's happening in Washington, D.C. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.